Dear White Britain, we hate to say we told you so about Boris Johnson, but we told you so. At the outset of his ascent in frontline politics, Black Britons warned that Johnson was immoral and unscrupulous. We did try. There is a Jamaican nugget of wisdom: if you cyaan ear, you muse feel. It translates to, those that don't hear must feel. In other words, if you fail to learn from caution, you end up learning from consequence. Had Britain heard the screams of caution from black people about the racism and, therefore, unsuitability for office of Boris Johnson, there is a good chance Britain would not be feeling the pain and shame of demise we are right now. In the story of race in Britain, Johnson may be as deserving of his own special chapter as Enoch Powell. And a fascinatingly complex chapter it would be. It is hard to conceive of anyone who has seemingly done more to decimate anti-racism movements and relegitimize racism in Britain, for his own political gain, but simultaneously just as hard to name anyone who did more for high-level political diversity, once seen as a vital measure of racial progress. Powell gave a speech, Johnson gave power and the respectability of diversity to racism. As a shock jock scribe, Johnson played to the nativist gallery with attempts at humor that only a drink-sodden toadying upper-middle-class dinner party, or a fawning media class, would laugh at. There was his reference to watermelon smiles and flag-waving pickaninnies in an infamous 2002 Telegraph column about a trip by Tony Blair to West Africa. But there were myriad others. The problem is not that we were once in charge of Africa, but that we are not in charge anymore. If left to their own devices, the natives would rely on nothing but the instant carbohydrate gratification of the plantain, scribbled Johnson in The Spectator. Indeed, a cursory study of his time as editor of The Spectator suggests an apparent disdain for, obsession with, and envy or fear of black people in particular. He did not write, but he published at least one patently, eye-wateringly racist pseudoscientific article suggesting black people had low IQs. Another piece published under his editorship described Jamaican immigrants, i.e. descendants of Africans enslaved by Britain, as ludicrously self-satisfied, macho, lupin-gated, gold-chained and front-toothed predators of the slums, with the bodies of giants and the mind of a pea. Another dismissed the idea of disaffected black youth as politically correct cover for black thugs, sons of black thugs and grandsons of black thugs. The piece contained the bigotry bat signal, boy, oh boy, was Enoch, God rest his soul, ever right. Far from making him a pariah, his early catalogue of racist waffle, written by or apparently sanctioned by him, helped to propel Johnson to success. Whether it was Brexit, during the campaign he labeled President Obama a part Kenyan president with an ancestral dislike of Britain, his refusal to condemn England fans who booed their own players for making an anti-racism gesture, his visit to Myanmar as Foreign Secretary, during which the UK ambassador to Myanmar had to stop him reciting a colonial-era poem, or writing in a column that Muslim women wearing burqas look like letter boxes, which some critics blamed, at least in part, for a 375% rise in reports of Islamophobic incidents. Time and again over the course of his career Johnson would return to his reliable ace, the racism card. Often the offense was camouflaged. The burqa article, for example, argued against a ban in Britain. Which is classic Johnson, playing the liberal and the crowd-pleasing, devil-may-care reactionary at once. And we would complain and no one would listen and no one would do anything. Hey race, a funny thing, no one has appointed more people from ethnic minorities to senior political positions than Boris Johnson. His cabinet was unthinkably diverse, the statistics speak for themselves. But as the business professor and economist Aaron Levenstein once cautioned about statistics, what they reveal is suggestive, but what they conceal is vital. What the statistics concealed is the fact that Johnsonian diversity represented a giant leap forward for racism. If you were an ethnic minority anti-woke culture war warrior, the Johnson years were a land of milk of honey. Your anti-woke provocation was your qualification. A couple of viral anti-woke tweets or YouTube clips could propel you into the Johnsonian stratosphere or into a prestigious national institution. Thanks to Johnsonian diversity, Britain now has more ethnic minorities in positions of power than ever. But arguably he used it to undermine anti-racism or racial progress in society at large. His willingness to brazenly do so was part of his nativist appeal. That was disreputable, but then he is disreputable and we knew that. We did find the emergency glass, we did break it. And now you know what we knew about that willingness to offend, the readiness to trash rules and norms for cheap gain and self-advantage. In that respect, today, he has brought us closer together, that's a silver lining of sorts. Dear White Britain, we hate to say we told you so about Boris Johnson, but we told you so. At the outset of his ascent in frontline politics, Black Britons warned that Johnson was immoral and unscrupulous. We did try. There is a Jamaican nugget of wisdom: if you cyaan ear, you muse feel. It translates to, those that don't hear must feel. In other words, if you fail to learn from caution you end up learning from How to arrest the government. Trump's indictment puts pressure on GOP aspirants to propose sweeping reforms. In seeking an unprecedented federal indictment against a former president, the Justice Department carelessly issued an additional arrest warrant, its own. Republicans are no longer simply moaning about weaponized government and the unaccountable swamp. They are making complete overhaul a campaign priority. Most of the press continues obsessing over the GOP primary field's response to Donald Trump's indictment, presenting it as an impossible bind. How can they get any airtime amid another Trump show? How do they hit the former president without alienating the base? The first debate is still 2 months away, the first caucus 7, but it's never too early for this crew to paint Republican fortunes as grim. Lost in this non-analysis is that the indictment handed the entire field a powerful issue: root and branch government reform. The Trump presidency was roiled by a partisan FBI investigation, non-stop leaks, endless bureaucratic sabotage. Republicans have complained about a 2 million-strong federal civil service that has been hostile to GOP presidents since Ronald Reagan, yet failed to make a priority of change. The indictment was the straw that broke the elephant's back, the kick the party needed to get serious. Nearly every notable contender, Mike Pence, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, has already vowed to fire the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Wray, in response to alarming stories of investigations into protesting parents, Catholics and pro-life groups as well as election interference. Mr. Scott says he'd go further and dismiss all political appointees at the FBI. Nikki Haley suggests something more sweeping: getting rid of just senior management isn't going to be enough to fix this. This is going to take a complete overhaul. Unsurprisingly, a very detailed, and far more aggressive, plan is coming from energetic entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, whose warnings about the unelected bureaucracy have been a central campaign feature from the start. He pledges to dismantle the education department, which should not have existed in the first place. He'd shut down agencies whose culture cannot be reformed, including the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service, and